Hi, and welcome back from home after my summer abroad at Bond Uni from September to December 2024. So, in this video, I'm going to delve a bit into my overall experience, the accommodation I have, the student life and lifestyle of the Gold Coast, as well as the culture. And in the second part of the video, I'm going to talk about my goals that I set prior to commencing this summer abroad and whether I was able to achieve them or not. So, without further ado, let's jump right into it. So, I decided to live in a student accommodation that is called Varsity Towers. I had a single room because I didn't want to share my room with someone, to be honest, because I don't know the person and I wanted to have like my own little space to wind down about after a busy day and after a day full of lectures and activities. And in hindsight, I really think this was a great choice because I was living only 10 minutes on foot from campus. So I really get to enjoy lots of the benefits of living close to campus and all the facilities that they had. So sometimes I would go to the Olympic swimming pool after lectures, or I would participate every week in different group exercise classes. And I got to try out so many different sports, which I think I wouldn't do if I didn't live that close to campus. So I went to plenty of group exercise classes. I tried Pilates, I tried functional fitness, I did the strength and conditioning circuit. I tried boxing, and I think had I lived further away from campus, I would be too lazy to just go to campus to visit a class. But because it was so close and convenient, I would go there regularly and get to meet lots of new people throughout these different classes. Obviously, no accommodation is perfect, and upon moving in, I had one or two funny experiences. For instance, cockroaches. Despite my apartment being really clean, compared to other students when I moved in, I sat down to dinner, and one night I just saw the cockroaches passing through, which was a bit of a shock. But apparently, it's like a big thing in Gold Coast that there are many cockroaches because of the climate. So, the yeah, landlords are required to do pest control every 6 months, which they did after I notified them of the incidents. And then also we had some water shortages in or outages, rather said, in the beginning of the sem. But it was a good opportunity actually to meet new people and laugh about it and bond over it because everyone had a water outage. No one could shower. So everyone went out on the aisle, and I finally got to meet all the people who lived on floor five, which was my floor. And so we took it with humor, and it was a great opportunity to meet other people and, yeah, bond over the shared misery. So now I want to talk a bit about my student life or how I experienced the life at Bond. So at Bond Uni, you only have 4 courses per semester, or rather trimester, because they have shorter study periods. However, they do 3 trimesters instead of only 2 semesters. So on uni, you can do an accelerated degree and, for instance, study bachelor in only 2 years instead of 3 years. So, having only 4 courses means I could dedicate a lot more time to my courses, so I could dive a bit deeper, and there were also a lot more project works than back home, which I personally really enjoyed because it was a great opportunity to individualize and kind of tailor your project according to your own interests and focus on an area that you are more interested in. And also, we had so called forums, which is kind of a lecture but more interactive in terms of having more case studies or group discussions. And the lectures really try to involve the students by asking many questions and trying you to share your experiences and contribute to the classes. And then we had tutorials, which were basically exercise classes where you kind of try to um, yeah, to practice what you learned during the forums. So, in terms of culture, Australian people are really laid back, and there's this thing called bond time. So, they would, for instance, if the lecture started at 9, they would start at 5 past 9 because they knew there were some students who had to walk all the way across campus to go to the class. So the lectures wouldn't start at the time that was set, but always 5 minutes later to give everyone the opportunity to arrive and to settle in and start with the class. And what I liked a lot was that every lecturer would introduce themselves on a first name basis, and they would even tell us their nickname. So we had a lecturer, she was called Deborah Smith, but she would just tell us that we should call her Deb. And it is apparently a really common thing in Australia to just tell your first name or even a nickname. So even I got a nickname from my Australian classmate. And in the end, I was no longer Larissa, I was called Liz. Yeah, which was something that quite stood out to me in terms of Australian culture. And the people are very approachable and laid back. So it was the perfect country to go to learn English because it's very common for them to just approach strangers and chinwag with them and just start up a conversation out of the nowhere, even if they don't know you. So, for instance, today when I moved into my student accommodation on the 30th of August, I was walking around town. I was dragging around my suitcase, and suddenly, like a retired person in his front yard, he came to me and he asked me if I was looking for the uni, and he explained me the way how to go to the accommodation, and he talked to me about for about half an hour and explained me everything in the neighborhood, the different districts of Gold Coast, and the perfect time to go whale watching, that I should go to Burleigh, and all the activities and things I could do in the region and the best bakeries. So I think that's a really nice feature of Australian culture, that they're very warm and welcoming and they like to talk to everybody, even strangers. And yeah, another thing that I liked is that our lectures were very personable, approachable. So they would oftentimes talk about what they did on the weekend, and they would even suggest us activities that we could do on the weekend, or some cultural events that we could participate in that were currently running on the Gold Coast. And yeah, in terms of animal, I also experienced my fair share, and I got attacked by a magpie, the infamous magpie during its whooping season, which put its claws in my back head. So that was also quite of experience being chased over campus by a magpie. Yeah, so in terms of people, also many people who study at Bond have a bit of an unconventional path. They worked before, did something else, and didn't just study, which I personally quite enjoyed. So I got to meet one of my classmates who's now my friend. And for instance, he wrote a novel about Aboriginals and he's working on doing some screenplays at the moment, which is quite interesting for me. And I met another Aussie friend, and he's doing a Juris Doctor, which is kind of a degree you can do to become a lawyer if you don't have a bachelor degree in law, but you have some kind of other bachelor and you already have a basis. And for instance, he was doing light aircraft sales. He sold little aircrafts as his own business. So he worked 50% and then he just did 50% of study. So he would just prolong his degree and take 2 courses per sem instead of 4 courses, sorry. So let's now talk a bit about my goals in terms of language that I set prior to my exchange or study abroad, sorry. So the first one was with regards to listening in terms of having no difficulty understanding any kind of spoken language, whether it's live or broadcast. And for that, I set myself the goal, obviously, to listen to lectures in Aussie accent, which I did basically Monday to Friday every week. However, I have to say that in general, the lectures at uni, they tend to speak a bit different than the average Aussie that you meet on the street in terms of toning down their accent a bit. And they try to avoid a bit of idiomatic language so that everyone can follow along. And I also realized that probably there's a bit of a difference in social class and how people talk, because people of the lower social classes, or yeah, would usually talk more nasally, versus people of higher social classes would use a bit different vocabulary in terms of how they express themselves. And yeah, usually Vogans, as they call them, would just speak in more laid back, more abbreviations than people at university. And then another goal that I set to myself was to watch some movies. To be honest, Gold Coast wasn't really very tempting to go watch movies, so I didn't really watch movies while I was there. I didn't go to the cinema. However, what I did is my friend Courts, he knew someone who studied film, and he invited me to go to this graduation project called Center Screen, which were 12 movies of 12 graduating students in film and television studies. So they did some short movies that were each 20 minutes long. So I went to this event and it was great fun. They even had a professional jury from industry who would come in and then discuss and give awards for best director, best camera work, etc. So this was great fun, and also more authentic because they filmed their movies on the Gold Coast. So in some movies, they even filmed the university, so I could recognize some of the locations that they filmed. And he also had local people as a cast to play actors, so I could listen a bit to the Aussie accent while watching these movies. Apart from that, the only films that I watched was during my flight back with Emirates. I watched two movies. I watched Pride and Prejudice in English, and then I watched another movie about basically student teacher's life and a bit of problems while teaching, which was called The Teacher's Lounge. Sorry. So I watched two movies during my plane trip, and 12 short movies while I was there in Australia. So, in terms of speaking, I set myself to go, sorry, listening. I also talked a lot to my Aussie friend Courtney, and the one who wrote the novel about Aboriginals. And he used a lot of expressions that I kind of could pick up on, which I didn't know before. So he said lots of things like, I'm going to hit the dunny. And I had no clue what it meant. So I learned lots of new expressions for toilet, or like more local Australian language through like spending time with him. So, in terms of speaking, I set myself the goal that I can take part effortlessly in all conversations and discussions with native speakers. So, to do that, I wanted to discuss my lectures, which I set out as a goal. And to be honest, I did that sometimes, but more often we would discuss other topics with my friends, like weekend plans or trips that we wanted to take together. So we didn't really discuss a lot about lectures. And another goal related to this was picking up some colloquial expressions and idiomatic language. So I recognize there's some expressions that Aussies use a lot, which is I reckon or heaps of. Instead of saying many, they always say heaps of something. Um, so I could pick up some characteristics of local Australian English, which I set as a goal. Let's move on to writing, where I said in a report essay, I can give a complete account of topics based on research I've carried out, make a summary of the opinions of others, and give and evaluate detailed information and facts. So during my study abroad, I did two essays. One was a reflective paper for my course World Languages, where I kind of reflected a bit on the experience I made in the language snapshots of French, Chinese, and Japanese. So this was basically a reflective paper which was written in the I form. However, we had to integrate some academic sources about second language acquisition and language studies and language learning into it. So it's a mixture of more personal writing and using the I, which you wouldn't really do in a normal academic text, but also having some more sophisticated language when discussing the research, the linguistic research surrounding the topics. And the second paper that I wrote during my SEM abroad was how policies of multiculturalism can enhance students' education for a course called Intercultural Communication. So, this was more of a classic academic essay where I had to discuss some research and also um, give an opinion. However, it had to be underpinned by research. I couldn't say I believe that. I had to point out what different researchers would say about the topic and then, yeah, give my opinion indirectly through the research, which was more classic academic writing. Um, so I also did a summaries of my lectures, which I set myself as a goal. So I had one course, psychology at work, where we had a written exam at the end of the sem. So for this class, I would make written summaries of the textbook chapters each week. So I did that regularly, and then I had a list of colloquial and idiomatic expressions that I set myself as a goal. But in the end, it turned out to be more of a list of sophisticated expressions, I'd say. So expressions that I read from the textbook, or yeah, I didn't really list the idiomatic or yeah, more informal language that people use, but I memorized it in my head more. Um, I have a list of more textbook and language than idiomatic expressions. In terms of reading, my goal was I can understand text in a very colloquial style and containing many idiomatic expressions or slang. So, in terms of that, I planned to read many internet blog posts. I think this goal was the hardest for me to achieve because during my time in Australia, the lifestyle was more outdoorsy and more sports oriented and going to the beach. So I didn't stay a lot inside and read. So I didn't spend my time reading blog posts. However, I did receive a book written by one of my lecturers. She gave it to me as a gift. So my intercultural communication lecturer, Marie Claire, would give me the book Diary of a French Girl, which was about a girl from France that was on exchange for in Sydney for 1 year, and it was a mixture of more informal diary entries translated to English from French, as well as some more sophisticated language because the lecture Marie Claire would explain the phenomenon of culture shock and reverse culture shock and how the experiences of this French girl tied into this phenomenon. So I did read this book while I was abroad and yeah, I quite enjoyed it. It was cool and it was a perfect mixture between formal language and more informal language. So, in general, I would say to sum up that Australian lifestyle is very friendly and welcoming. I really enjoyed the fact that when you go into a bus, everyone says hi to the bus driver, and when people walk out, everyone thanks them, which would never happen in Switzerland because people just walk in and walk out without talking to the bus driver usually. So I really enjoyed this kind of friendly, open attitude. And also, I noticed that Australian people, don't really complain which was really nice for a change to have a very positive atmosphere. And yeah, I think it really did me well. Um, and in general, Australian peoples are early birds. Australian people are early birds, so I was quite surprised when I arrived that it was dark. I arrived in end of August, so it's still kind of winter, early spring in Australia. So I wanted to go out and watch the sunset at 6 p.m. I opened the door and I stepped outside. It was pitch dark, which I was quite surprised about. However, they do wake up really early. So Australian people are usually out at the beach. I saw them jogging and running or going swimming just for a dip or surfing just before work. So they are out and about at 6 a.m. in the morning, some of them even earlier to catch the sunrise. And they usually go to bed really early, like 9 p.m., 10 p.m., which is a big difference that I noted compared to Switzerland. However, I have to say that for me, while I was in Australia, I would wake up earlier automatically because I could feel the sun, and I'm usually a person that rises with the sun. So if it's dark in winter and there's no sun, I find it really hard to get out of bed. But as soon as I feel the sun rays on my skin, I wake up. And usually also the birds are so loud, they're singing. Some of them are singing at 4 a.m. in the morning and others at 6 a.m. So you usually just wake up by the sound of the birds in the morning. And I always woke up before my alarm clock, like sometimes at 4 a.m., sometimes at 6 a.m. Yeah, so that was it, my little insight into my SEM abroad at Bond University. I think it was the best decision I made in my life so far, and I'm really glad I made this amazing experience. And I really want to keep up with my friends. So with Courtney, we're still in contact. We're writing each other and keeping each other updated on WhatsApp about our lives. Yeah, and I can hope I can keep this contact up and yeah, keep up with many of the other amazing friends that I made along the way. Yeah, that was it, my video, and thanks for watching. Bye bye.